3 weeks after the gas station incident, Dale sat in his garage working on his Harley. His wife, Patricia, brought him a cold beer and sat down on the old couch he kept out there for exactly this purpose. "You've been different lately," she said, watching him adjust something on the engine. Dale looked up, wiping grease from his hands. "Different how?" "I don't know. Calmer, maybe. More thoughtful?" She took a sip of her own beer. "Don't get me wrong, I like it. I'm just curious what brought it on." Dale set down his wrench and leaned against his bike. He'd been thinking about whether to tell Patricia the full story of what happened at that gas station. The guys had all agreed to keep it mostly to themselves, not wanting to blast it all over social media or make a big thing out of it. But this was his wife. He told her everything. "Remember that ride we took up the coast a few weeks back?" He started. "Of course. Well, something happened. We stopped for gas and there was this woman there pumping gas like anyone else. And we recognized her. She's an actress, pretty famous." Patricia was listening carefully now. "We got excited, you know how it is. Started asking for pictures, crowding around her car. We thought we were just being friendly fans." He paused, remembering. "But we weren't, really. We were making her uncomfortable, not listening when she tried to politely end the conversation. We were acting like we had a right to her time just because we'd seen her movies." "Oh, Dale," Patricia said softly. "I know. And then this other guy showed up. Also famous, someone we all recognized. And he called us out on it. But in this really calm, respectful way. He didn't make us feel like garbage, but he made us see what we were doing wrong. Made us think about how we'd feel if we were in her position." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "That must have been hard to hear." "It was," Dale admitted. "But it was also necessary. And you know what? They were both incredibly gracious about it. After we apologized, after we understood what we'd done wrong, they took pictures with us. They treated us like real people, not just annoying fans. That was kind of them. It was more than kind. It was a lesson in how to treat people with respect, even when they've just disrespected you." He picked up his beer and took a long drink. "I've been thinking about it a lot. About all the times I've probably made people uncomfortable without realizing it. Not just famous people, but anyone. The waitress I keep chatting with when she's clearly busy. The cashier I joke around with who's just trying to get through their shift." Patricia reached over and squeezed his hand. "This is why I married you. You're willing to learn, willing to change." "I'm trying," he said. "We all are. The guys and I have been talking about it, about being more aware, more respectful of people's space and time." Dale thought about the group chat the five of them had going. Ever since that day, they'd been sharing moments where they caught themselves about to cross a boundary and pulled back instead, supporting each other and being better. Tommy, the youngest of their group, had told them about seeing a minor celebrity at the mall and deliberately not approaching them, even though he wanted to. "Let them shop in peace," he'd written. The rest of them had sent encouragement and praise. Meanwhile, across town, the gas station attendant who'd witnessed the whole thing had told a few people about it. Not in a gossipy way, but in an "I saw something interesting" way. The story had spread slowly through the neighborhood, then to friends in other parts of the city. Eventually, a version of it made its way to social media. Someone who'd heard it third hand posted about it, leaving out names but including enough details that people could guess who was involved. The post got some attention, but not in the way celebrity gossip usually did. Instead of people commenting about how cool it was to meet famous actors, they were talking about the lesson. About boundaries and respect. About how to approach people you admire without making them uncomfortable. The conversation was thoughtful, surprisingly mature. A few people shared their own stories about times they'd crossed someone's boundaries without realizing it. Others talked about times their boundaries had been crossed and how it made them feel. It became this unexpected moment of collective reflection. Sandra saw the post about a week after the incident. Someone had sent it to her, asking if it was about her. She read through it and smiled. The person who wrote it had gotten some details wrong, but the core message was right, and the comments were actually lovely, full of people genuinely trying to be better. She screenshot some of the best comments and sent them to Keanu. "Look at this. We started something," he responded quickly. "That's pretty cool. Maybe those guys are spreading the word. Maybe. Or maybe people are just ready to think about this stuff. Either way, it's good." Sandra thought about responding more publicly, maybe confirming the story or adding her own perspective, but she decided against it. The conversation happening online didn't need her validation. It was organic, real, people working through ideas on their own. Sometimes the best thing you could do was let something unfold without trying to control it. She did, however, start being more vocal about boundaries in her own life. During interviews, when asked about dealing with fans, she spoke honestly about the challenges. Not in a complaining way, but in an educational one, explaining what felt good and what felt invasive and why. Other celebrities started doing the same. It was like Sandra and Keanu's gas station encounter had been a small pebble dropped in a pond, and the ripples were spreading outward. Conversations about respecting celebrities' privacy became more common, more nuanced, but it wasn't just about famous people. The broader conversation about boundaries and consent extended to everyday interactions. People started thinking more carefully about how they approached strangers, how much personal space they gave others, how to read social cues better. Teachers used the story in classrooms to talk about empathy and respect. A few podcasts discussed it as an example of de-escalation techniques. It became one of those cultural moments that was bigger than the actual event, a catalyst for conversations that needed to happen anyway. For Sandra and Keanu, life went on much as it had before. They stayed in touch now, actually following through on their promise to not let years go by without talking. They'd text each other random thoughts, meet for coffee when their schedules allowed. Just be friends. About 2 months after the gas station incident, they were both invited to the same charity event. It was one of those formal affairs with too much champagne and too many speeches. But the cause was good, so they both showed up. They found each other in the crowd and immediately gravitated to a quiet corner to catch up. They were laughing about something when a woman approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to thank you both." Sandra and Keanu exchanged glances. "Thank us for what?" Sandra asked. "I heard about what happened at that gas station. The story that went around online. I don't know if it was really you two, but either way it made me think about how I interact with people. I'm a teacher, and I use that story in my classroom to talk about respect and boundaries. It led to the best discussion I've had with my students in years." Sandra felt her throat get tight. "That's wonderful. Thank you for telling us. No, thank you. For handling a difficult situation with such grace. For teaching people without making them feel attacked. We need more of that in the world." After she walked away, Keanu looked at Sandra. "I guess we really did start something." "I guess we did." They stood there quietly for a moment, watching the crowd mill around. All these people in their fancy clothes, playing their parts, maintaining their images. Sandra wondered how many of them were struggling with the same things she was. The loss of privacy, the constant performance, the feeling of being public property. But she also thought about the teacher who'd just thanked them, about Dale and his friends learning to be more thoughtful, about all the small changes rippling out from one random Tuesday afternoon. Maybe that's all any of them could do. Try to be a little better, a little kinder, a little more aware. A photographer approached, asking for a photo of the two of them. Sandra almost said no automatically, but then she thought better of it. "Sure," she said. "But just one, please." The photographer nodded, took his shot, thanked them, and moved on to find other subjects. Professional, respectful, exactly what the interaction should be, see? Keanu said quietly. "It's working." "Maybe," Sandra said. "Or maybe we're just learning to set better boundaries. Can it be both?" She smiled. "Yeah, I guess it can." As the evening wore on, Sandra found herself actually enjoying the event. She had good conversations, laughed with old friends, and didn't feel the usual pressure to be on every single second. She was learning to just be herself, even in these public spaces. Later, when she got home and was getting ready for bed, she got a text from an unknown number. Her first instinct was annoyance. Someone had gotten her private number again. But when she opened it, she saw it was from Dale. "Hi, this is Dale from the gas station. I got your number from a mutual friend. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to let you know that my whole writing group has been different since that day. We're more thoughtful, more respectful. We're teaching our kids about boundaries. So thank you for being patient with us, and thank your friend for taking the time to educate us. It mattered." Sandra stared at the message for a long moment. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected the bikers to reach out weeks later with an update. It was touching in a way she couldn't quite put into words. She typed back carefully. "Thank you for telling me this. And thank you for being open to learning. That takes real character. Keep being thoughtful. The world needs more people like you. She hit send, then added one more message. And it's okay that you have my number. Just please keep it private. Absolutely, I will. Take care. You too. Sandra put her phone down and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked tired, the long day showing on her face. But she also looked content, more at peace than she'd felt in a while. One random encounter at a gas station had somehow turned into this whole thing. A moment of discomfort that became a teaching opportunity, that became a broader cultural conversation that became real. Measurable change in people's lives. It reminded her why she'd gotten into acting in the first place. Not for the fame or the money, but because she believed in the power of stories to change people, to make them think, to inspire them to be better. And sometimes those stories happened in movies, and sometimes they happened at gas stations in Los Angeles on a Tuesday afternoon. She got into bed, Walter immediately curling up next to her. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thought was about how you never really knew what impact you might have on the world. Sometimes the smallest moments, the briefest interactions, could ripple out in ways you'd never expect. All you could do was try to make those moments count. Try to be kind, be thoughtful, be willing to both teach and learn. The rest would take care of itself. And somewhere across the city, Keanu was probably thinking similar thoughts as he worked on a motorcycle in his garage. Still grounded, still humble, still just trying to be a good person in a complicated world. The gas station where it all happened still stood on that quiet road off the highway. The attendant still worked there. Still told the story sometimes to customers who seemed interested. It had become part of the place's history. This random Tuesday when 2 actors and 5 bikers all learned something about respect and humanity. And life went on. As it always does, but maybe just a little bit better than before. Sandra drove home with the windows down, letting the warm evening air blow through her hair. The radio was playing some old song from the 90s, and she found herself humming along without really thinking about it. Her mind kept drifting back to the gas station, to the cafe, to the unexpected turn her ordinary Tuesday had taken. The whole encounter with the bikers had left her thinking. It wasn't the first time something like that had happened, and it probably wouldn't be the last. But something about today felt different. Maybe it was because of how it ended, with an actual conversation and mutual understanding instead of just her driving away feeling unsettled. She thought about Dale, the gray-bearded leader of the group, and how genuinely apologetic he'd seemed once he realized they'd crossed a line. Most people weren't bad, she reminded herself. They just got caught up in the moment, in their excitement, and forgot that celebrities were real people with feelings and boundaries. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She glanced down at a red light and saw a text from her sister. "Dinner this weekend?" Sandra smiled and quickly typed back a yes before the light changed. Family time sounded good right about now. As she drove through her neighborhood, she passed other people going about their evenings. A man walking 3 dogs, a couple pushing a stroller, teenagers skateboarding in a parking lot. Regular people doing regular things. Sometimes she envied them, their anonymity, their ability to exist in the world without constant recognition. But then she thought about what Keanu had said at the cafe. Acting was his job, not who he was. She'd spent so long being Sandra Bullock, the actress, that sometimes she forgot there was just Sandra underneath it all. A regular person who liked coffee and long drives and quiet afternoons. When she pulled into her driveway, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She sat in the car for a moment, not quite ready to go inside yet. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Keanu. Just making sure you got home okay." She smiled and saved his contact information before responding. "Just pulled in. Thanks for checking. And thanks again for today, no problem. Let's not wait so long next time." "Agreed. Talk soon." She put her phone away and finally got out of the car. Inside, the house was quiet and cool. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. As she stood at the sink, looking out the window at her backyard, she thought about how random life could be. If she'd stopped at a different gas station, or if Keanu had taken a different route on his ride, they never would have run into each other. The bikers would have probably pushed her boundaries even further without anyone to intervene. The whole afternoon would have been completely different, but that's how life worked, wasn't it? A series of small decisions and random chances that added up to something meaningful. She'd chosen that particular gas station because it was quiet. Keanu had stopped there because he needed a break from riding. The bikers had shown up because that was their route. All these separate threads coming together at exactly the right moment. Her cat, a fat orange tabby named Walter, wandered into the kitchen and meowed loudly. Sandra laughed and bent down to scratch behind his ears. "Hey buddy, miss me?" Walter purred and wound around her legs, his usual routine when she came home. She fed him, then made herself a simple dinner of pasta and salad. She ate at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone without really paying attention to what she was seeing. Her mind kept going back to the conversation at the cafe. Keanu had asked her if she ever thought about walking away from acting, and she'd said yes. But sitting here now, she wondered if she really meant it. What would she even do if she quit? She'd been doing this for so long that it was hard to imagine another life. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe she'd gotten so absorbed in being an actress that she'd lost sight of everything else she could be. Maybe that's why encounters like today bothered her so much. Because when people saw her, they only saw the movies, the red carpets, the fame. They didn't see the person who liked to cook, who talked to her cat, who sometimes spent entire Sundays reading in bed. She finished eating and washed her dishes, finding comfort in the simple routine of it. Then she grabbed a book she'd been meaning to read and curled up on the couch. Walter immediately jumped up and settled on her lap, purring like a small motor. About an hour later, her phone rang. It was her best friend, calling for their usual Tuesday night catch-up. Sandra told her about the gas station incident, about Keanu showing up, about the coffee afterward. "That's so Keanu," her friend said. "Of course he just appeared out of nowhere to help. I know, right? It was very him. And you guys just happened to both be there at the exact same time. That's wild." "The whole thing was surreal," Sandra admitted, "but in a good way mostly. I mean, the biker part wasn't fun, but everything after was actually really nice." They talked for another half hour about work, family, life in general. Her friend was dealing with a difficult boss and needed to vent. Sandra listened, offered advice, and felt grateful for the distraction from her own thoughts. After they hung up, Sandra realized she felt lighter somehow. The gas station encounter had been stressful, but it had also led to a genuine human connection. Not just with Keanu, but even with the bikers in a weird way. They'd all learned something today. She thought about what she'd told them, about actors being people too, with good days and bad days. It was such a simple concept, but one that people seemed to forget. Everyone was so focused on the image, the persona, that they forgot about the actual human being underneath. The next morning, Sandra woke up early for her call time. She was working on a new film, a drama about family relationships that she was also producing. The early call times were brutal, but she loved the project, loved the script, loved the team she was working with. On set, between takes, she found herself thinking about boundaries again, about how Keanu had handled the situation so perfectly, redirecting without confronting, teaching without preaching. She wondered if she could apply that same approach to other areas of her life. During lunch, her co-star asked if she was okay. "You seem different today," he said. "In a good way? More relaxed or something?" "I had an interesting day yesterday," Sandra said. She told him a shortened version of the story, leaving out some of the details. "That could have gone really badly," he said. "Yeah, it could have, but it didn't. And I think everyone involved learned something. That's a good way to look at it." The rest of the day went smoothly. Sandra felt more present than usual, more engaged with the work. Maybe it was the conversation with Keanu yesterday, the reminder about why they did this in the first place, not for the fame or the recognition, but for the actual craft of storytelling. That evening, she got another text from Keanu. "How was your early call?" "Long but good." "How was your day?" "Quiet, worked on a bike." "Read a book." "Very exciting stuff," she smiled at the phone. "Sounds perfect, actually. Want to grab dinner sometime this week?" "Yes, let me check my schedule and get back to you." It felt good to make plans, to have something to look forward to beyond work obligations and scheduled events. Real friendship, real connection. That's what yesterday had reminded her she needed more of in her life. Over the next few days, Sandra noticed she was handling things differently. When a photographer tried to sneak pictures of her at the grocery store, instead of getting angry, she politely asked him to stop and explained why it made her uncomfortable. To her surprise, he apologized and left. When a fan approached her at a restaurant, she was more aware of her own body language, making sure she wasn't encouraging them to stay longer than she was comfortable with. She was kind but firm, and they respected her boundaries. She thought about the bikers a lot, about how they'd needed someone to point out what they were doing wrong, but in a way that didn't make them defensive. About how Keanu had managed that so perfectly. She tried to channel that same energy in her own interactions. On Thursday night, she met Keanu for dinner at a small Italian place they both loved. It was tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where they could actually talk without being interrupted. "I've been thinking about what you said," Sandra told him over appetizers, "about how most people aren't trying to be jerks, they just don't realize how they're coming across." "Yeah? I've been trying to apply that. Being more direct about my boundaries, but in a kind way, and it's actually working. People respond better when you don't attack them." Keanu smiled. "That's great. I'm glad it's helping. It's funny how one random encounter can change your perspective on things. That's life though, right? Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places." They talked about everything and nothing over pasta and wine. Work, yes, but also books, music, places they wanted to travel. Sandra realized she was laughing more than she had in weeks, maybe months. Just being around Keanu's calm, grounded energy made her feel more like herself. "This is nice," she said at one point. "Just being normal people having dinner." "We are normal people," Keanu reminded her. "We just have unusual jobs." "You really believe that, don't you?" "I have to. Otherwise I'd lose my mind." Sandra understood that completely. The only way to survive in this industry was to remember who you were underneath all the noise, to hold on to the parts of yourself that had nothing to do with fame or success. As they left the restaurant, a couple of people recognized them and asked for photos. This time both Sandra and Keanu set clear boundaries. They were happy to take one picture, but then they needed to go. The people were respectful, thanked them, and left them alone, "See?" Keanu said as they walked to their cars. "Most people are cool if you're just honest with them." "Most people," Sandra agreed. "Not all, but most." They hugged goodbye, promising again not to let so much time pass before seeing each other. As Sandra drove home, she felt grateful for that random Tuesday at the gas station. Grateful for the discomfort that led to growth. Grateful for old friends and new perspectives. Life was unpredictable and sometimes challenging, but it was also full of small moments of grace if you paid attention to them. The cafe Keanu had mentioned was exactly the kind of place Sandra loved. Small, unpretentious, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. The kind of spot where nobody would bother them because the regulars were used to minding their own business. They walked in together, and the woman behind the counter looked up with a smile that faltered for just a second when she recognized them, but she recovered quickly, greeting them like any other customers. "What can I get you folks?" "Just a regular coffee, black," Keanu said. "Make that too," Sandra added. They found a corner table by the window, away from the handful of other customers scattered throughout the cafe. The afternoon sun streamed through the glass, creating warm patches of light on the worn wooden table. "I can't believe that just happened," Sandra said once they'd settled in. "Of all the gas stations in Los Angeles, we both end up at the same one at the exact same time." Keanu smiled. "What are the odds, right? Though LA is smaller than people think in some ways, I run into people I know more often than you'd expect." "Yeah, but usually not while being surrounded by overeager bikers." He laughed at that. "True. That was a first for me too." Their coffee arrived, delivered by a young guy with multiple piercings who was very deliberately not staring at them. Sandra wrapped her hands around the warm mug, appreciating its simple comfort. "Thank you, by the way," she said, looking directly at Keanu, "for what you did back there. I was starting to feel genuinely uncomfortable." "I could tell," he said. "That's why I came over. You had that look." "What look?" "The one we all get sometimes. When you're trying to be polite but you're also calculating your escape route." Sandra nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. And the worst part is they weren't even being that aggressive. Like compared to some encounters I've had, that was relatively mild. But it still felt invasive, you know?" "I know exactly what you mean." Keanu took a sip of his coffee. "That's the thing people don't always understand. It's not always about someone doing something obviously wrong. Sometimes it's just the accumulation of small things. Standing too close. Not listening when you say no. Treating you like you're public property. Yes." Sandra leaned forward, grateful to be talking to someone who actually got it. "That's exactly it. And then you feel bad for feeling uncomfortable. Because they're just excited, they're just fans, they just want a photo. And you start questioning yourself. Am I being ungrateful?
Am I being stuck up?
You're not, Keanu said firmly. Wanting personal space doesn't make you ungrateful. Wanting to pump gas without being surrounded doesn't make you stuck up. You're allowed to have boundaries. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both drinking their coffee and watching the street outside. A dog walker went by with 4 dogs of various sizes, all pulling in different directions. It made them both smile. How long has it been since we actually saw each other? Sandra asked. Not at some industry event where we waved from across the room but actually talked? Keanu thought about it. Has to be at least 2 years. Maybe 3? That's too long. We should be better about that. We really should, he agreed. Though I'm terrible about keeping in touch with people. I get so focused on whatever project I'm working on, and then suddenly months have gone by. Sandra laughed. I do the same thing. I'll think, oh, I should call so-and-so, and then I blink and it's been a year. We're both terrible at this, Keanu said with a grin. The worst, Sandra confirmed. A middle-aged couple at a nearby table kept glancing over, clearly recognizing them but too polite to interrupt. Sandra appreciated that kind of restraint. It was the difference between people who understood boundaries and people who didn't. So what have you been up to? Sandra asked. Besides rescuing damsels in distress at gas stations? Keanu shrugged. Working mostly. Just wrapped up a film a couple months ago. Doing some stuff with the motorcycle company. Taking rides when I can. He gestured out the window toward where his bike was parked. That's actually where I was coming from when I stopped. Just been riding around, clearing my head. The motorcycle company is doing well. Yeah, really well, actually. It's different from acting. More hands-on, more concrete. You build something and it exists in the real world, you know? It's satisfying in a different way. Sandra nodded. I get that. I've been doing more producing lately for the same reason. Actually making decisions about what gets made. Helping shape stories from the ground up instead of just showing up to act in them. How's that going? It's hard, she admitted. Harder than I thought it would be. But I like it. I like having more control over the kinds of stories we tell. Especially stories about women that feel real and complex. Keanu raised his coffee mug in a small salute. That's important work. They talked about the industry for a while, sharing war stories and frustrations. The projects that fell apart at the last minute. The scripts that needed work but nobody wanted to admit it. The constant pressure to stay relevant in an industry that worshipped youth. Do you ever think about just walking away from it all? Sandra asked. Just disappearing somewhere quiet and never making another movie? All the time, Keanu said without hesitation. Probably once a week I seriously consider it. But you don't? No. Because as frustrating as it can be, I still love the actual work. Being on set, collaborating with talented people, bringing a story to life. That part never gets old for me. Same, Sandra said. It's everything around it that's exhausting. The publicity, the constant scrutiny, the loss of privacy. But the work itself? I still love it. The woman from behind the counter came over to refill their coffee. You two need anything else? Some food, maybe? We've got really good sandwiches. I'm okay, thanks, Sandra said. Same here, Keanu added. The woman nodded and walked away, leaving them to their conversation. Sandra watched her go, then turned back to Keanu. You handled those guys really well back there, she said. The bikers. You didn't make them feel bad, but you still got the point across. Keanu looked thoughtful. I learned a long time ago that most people aren't trying to be jerks. They just don't realize how they're coming across. If you can point it out without attacking them, they usually get it. Not everyone has that skill, though. Most people would have either ignored the situation or come in way too aggressive. Maybe, he said. But I've been on both sides of it, you know? I've been the person who's uncomfortable, and I've also been the person who made someone else uncomfortable without realizing it. We all mess up sometimes. The important thing is being willing to learn. Sandra thought about the young biker, the one who'd mentioned his girlfriend telling him to be more aware of people's space. She hoped he'd actually listen to that feedback now. The whole encounter might have taught all 5 of them something valuable. You think they'll actually change? She asked. Or will they be doing the same thing to the next celebrity they run into? I think they'll be more thoughtful, Keanu said. At least for a while. Whether it sticks long-term, who knows? But we planted a seed. That's all you can really do. A family came into the cafe, a couple with 2 young kids who immediately ran toward the display case full of pastries. The parents looked tired but happy. and the kids were debating between a chocolate croissant and a cinnamon roll, with the kind of seriousness usually reserved for major life decisions. Watching them, Sandra felt a familiar pang. She'd thought a lot about kids over the years, about the family life she might have had if she'd made different choices, but she'd chosen her career, and most days she didn't regret it. Most days. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if you hadn't gotten into acting?" she asked. Keanu considered the question. "Sometimes. I probably would have done something with motorcycles anyway. Maybe owned a shop, built custom bikes, something with my hands. You would have been good at that." "What about you?" Sandra smiled. "I have no idea. Acting was always the plan. I can't really imagine doing anything else, even though there are days I want to quit." "Everyone has those days," Keanu said. "It's normal." They sat quietly for a while, just being comfortable in each other's presence. It was nice, Sandra thought, to be with someone who understood the unique weirdness of their lives without her having to explain it. Someone who'd been through the same things, dealt with the same pressures. "Can I ask you something?" Sandra said after a while. "Sure. How do you stay so grounded?" "Because you do, you know, more than almost anyone else I know in this business. You don't seem to let it change you." Keanu looked a bit uncomfortable with the compliment. "I don't know if that's true." "It is. Trust me." He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I guess I just try to remember that what I do is my job, not who I am. And I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. That sounds simple, maybe too simple, but it's really what it comes down to for me." "It's not too simple," Sandra said. "Simple doesn't mean easy." No, it definitely doesn't. The cafe was starting to fill up a bit more as the afternoon wore on. The after-work crowd was beginning to trickle in, people grabbing coffee before heading home or meeting friends for an early dinner. The noise level had risen slightly, but not uncomfortably so. Sandra checked her phone and was surprised to see how much time had passed. They'd been sitting there for almost an hour. "I should probably get going soon," she said, though she didn't really want to. "Yeah, me too," Keanu said, but he didn't make any move to leave either. "Before we do, though, can we make a pact? Let's not let another 2 or 3 years go by without actually talking." "Deal," Keanu said immediately. "Give me your number." "I think I deleted it when I got my new phone." They exchanged numbers, both promising they'd actually use them. Sandra meant it too. Today had reminded her how good it felt to talk to someone who really understood. Someone who'd been through similar experiences and come out the other side still essentially kind. "You know what's funny?" Sandra said as they stood up to leave. "The whole thing with the bikers, as uncomfortable as it was in the moment, kind of led to this. To us reconnecting. So maybe it wasn't entirely bad." "Silver lining," Keanu agreed. "Though next time we hang out, maybe we can skip the part where you're getting harassed first." Sandra laughed. "That would be preferable, yes." They walked to the counter to pay, but the woman waved them off. "It's on the house." "Thanks for choosing our place. Are you sure?" Sandra asked. "Absolutely. You two have been perfect customers. Quiet, polite, didn't cause a scene even though I'm sure you knew people recognized you. That's worth a couple of coffees." They thanked her and headed outside. The sun was lower now, painting everything in golden light. Keanu's motorcycle gleamed in the late afternoon sun, looking like something out of a magazine. "I forgot how much I love that bike," Sandra said, walking over to admire it. "It's beautiful. You want to take it for a spin?" Keanu offered. Sandra was tempted but shook her head. "Maybe next time. I should get home. I've got an early call tomorrow." "Next time then," he said. They hugged, a real hug between old friends, not one of those fake Hollywood air kisses. When they pulled apart, Sandra felt genuinely happy in a way she hadn't in a while. "Drive safe," Keanu said. "You too." "And Keanu, thanks again, for everything." "Anytime," he said, and she knew he meant it. The 5 bikers turned around almost in unison, and for a second, nobody said anything. They were trying to process who had just spoken to them. The voice had been polite enough, but there was something in it that made them stop and actually look. When they saw who it was, their expressions changed completely. Mouths dropped open. Eyes went wide. The young guy who'd been leaning on Sandra's car door, actually, stumbled backward a little. "No way," one of them whispered. "Is that—" another one started but didn't finish. The gray-bearded leader let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." Keanu gave them a small, friendly nod. He wasn't trying to make a big entrance or show off. He was just standing there in his simple black jacket and jeans, looking like any other guy who'd been out for a ride. But there was no mistaking who he was. Sandra felt a wave of relief wash over her. She hadn't expected anyone to step in, least of all someone she actually knew. She caught his eye for just a second, and there was a whole conversation in that glance. "Thank you. I've got you." "No problem." All without saying a word. The young biker who'd been blocking her door had now moved several feet away, suddenly very interested in his shoes. The whole group had shifted, their attention completely redirected from Sandra to Keanu. It was like watching a spotlight swing from one person to another. "Man, we were just talking to her," the gray-bearded one said, trying to sound casual. "Just being friendly, you know? We're big fans," Keanu nodded slowly. "I get it. She's great. I'm a fan too." His tone was conversational, not accusatory. "But sometimes people just want to get gas and go home, you know?" There was something about the way he said it that made it impossible to argue with. He wasn't telling them they were bad people. He wasn't even saying they'd done anything wrong exactly. He was just pointing out a simple truth in a way that made them see the situation differently. One of the middle-aged bikers, wearing a vest covered in patches, stepped forward. "Hey, wait. You're him from that movie, the one with the bullets," Keanu smiled. "I've been in a few with bullets." "You know which one I mean," the biker said, grinning now. "The one where you can dodge them." That was insane. My kid must have watched that thing 50 times. And just like that, the energy in the group started to shift. They were still excited, still starstruck, but their focus had completely moved away from Sandra. Keanu had given them something else to think about, someone else to talk to. The youngest of the group, who couldn't have been more than 30, pulled out his phone. "Can we get a picture with you instead?" "I mean, if that's cool?" "Maybe in a bit," Keanu said easily. "First, I wanted to ask you guys about those bikes. That's a nice setup you've got there, that did it. Nothing gets riders talking faster than someone showing genuine interest in their motorcycles." The gray-bearded leader immediately launched into a description of his bike, a custom Harley he'd been working on for 3 years. Another one started talking about the trip they were on, how they'd been riding up the coast for the past week. Keanu listened, asked questions, nodded at the right moments. He actually was interested. He'd always loved motorcycles, loved the freedom and simplicity of being on the road. But he was also keeping one eye on Sandra, making sure she was okay, making sure she had the space she needed. Sandra took the opportunity to finish up. She checked that her gas cap was secure, grabbed her receipt from the pump, and opened her car door. The bikers barely noticed. They were too busy telling Keanu about their favorite riding routes and comparing notes on different bike models.